Sup, boys? So today I wanted to talk to you all about New World. It's the MMORPG that's being developed by Amazon Studios, and it's slated to be released in spring of 2021, and it was originally going to be released right about now. And let me tell you, after playing the beta for almost 100 hours, or the preview for almost 100 hours, I am very glad that it was delayed. So I want to talk to you all about the positives of the game, the negatives, the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, and everything else in between. And I also want to just share my personal experience playing the game and things that I've done, and then also talk about where I hope the game goes from here. Now, first thing I do want to add a little bit of disclaimer here is I'm not going to talk a lot about the social features of the game because I played this game primarily as a streamer, and my experience playing the game is not necessarily what a lot of other people are going to have. So I'm going to kind of skip over a little bit of that. Now, just for a little bit of context on this game's been in development for a very long time, and it originally was going to be a PvP focused game, and then I think that after they probably saw the effect that Phase 2 Classic WoW had on the player base, the developers decided to go with a little bit more PvE stuff as well. And I think that's a good decision, by the way. So it's got a lot of survival aspects to it, like with eating food, building camps, and that kind of stuff. But the game has transitioned in many ways to being more of a traditional MMO. And because the alpha was under NDA, I was really excited to play this game because whenever a new MMO comes out, even if the game sucks absolute fucking dick, it's going to be pretty fun to play for at least a couple of weeks because you're going into this crazy new world. Nobody knows a fucking thing about it, and everybody's asking in trade chat, trying to make friends. Alliances are being formed, guilds are being made, rivalries are being created, and everything is just new and beautiful, and you have this honeymoon phase, and people are probably on many servers getting mad about it. So I think that the genesis of these MMOs is always beautiful, and sometimes it's chaotically beautiful, but it's still beautiful. And I had a lot of fun playing the game. I'll say that for sure. I really did enjoy it. But there's also a lot of dog shit ass bullshit that happens in the game. So I'm going to talk about that too. Now, number one, let's start with a positive, is the world. Now, the world of New World is probably one of the main things that even the people that didn't really like the game can probably agree looks pretty fucking good. Like, if you go around and you just look out and you see the sunset or the sunrise over the trees, and there's like there's like an elk in the corner. Don't listen to him, though, because the audio's fucked up, and I'll fix that later. But you see like the elk off in the background being very quiet. You see like the river underneath, and it just looks absolutely fucking great. You want to take a screenshot. You want to be there. And the whole world is set, I think it's pretty obvious, right? The world is set in somewhere around 1500s America. At least that's where it is in my mind. And so you see a lot of places that you probably see somewhere in, I don't know, like the Everglades or something like that. It's hard to say, but that's kind of the general geography of what they're going for. Now, the problem with the world is this. If you go to one of the ancient ruins, it's filled by skeletons that for some reason are not categorized as being undead, you've pretty much been to all of them. And so over in Morningdale, which is one of the mid-level to higher level zones in the game, you go to one ancient ruins and, you encounter one of these NPC skeletons. And by the way, like every single different mob in the game has its own different combat music. So you go up and you're fighting against one of these skeletons, and the moment that you go in combat with them, the nice, beautiful, calming, soothing tranquility of the music turns into this. You could just play that over and over and over, and it's pretty much the same fucking thing. It just plays the same fucking music, the same thumping drum sounds over and over and over. And it's so obnoxious and annoying. But beyond that, if you go to one of these different sites with these undead, or not, not undead, the ancient guardians, you've pretty much been to them all. There's like 5 or 6 of the different sites in each area, maybe even more in some areas, and they're exactly the same. They have the exact same mobs, they have the exact same type of chests, they have the exact type of like boss mobs, and it's just fucking boring. You see one of them, you've seen them all. And the odd thing about it is if you contrast that with some of the original areas in the game, it's not even remotely close. Like some of the original dungeons in the game, like there's this one gigantic life spire basically in the middle of the map that's a high level, max level dungeon, and you're traversing up this gigantic spire. You can see out into the open of the zone around you, and you're literally ascending this entire tower that's an outdoor dungeon. And not only are you ascending it, but there's different winding paths. There's different areas where there isn't necessarily like let's say the doorway is destroyed, and so instead of going through the doorway you have to go to the left or the right and climb up these different rocks that have collapsed as well. And the climbing features in the game are very good too, so that's fucking really cool, and I love that. And so I'd like to see the game utilize more of that unique world building and less of the copy pasting. And I think that with the world, you do have a lot of copy pasting. The ancient ruins are like that. The forts are like that. You walk into one fort and it's like, you have the outer area. You walk in the fort, you hit shot in the back by the archer that's right below you that you can't see walking in. And so the moment you just go through the doorway, you're immediately fucking hit by him. Really fun and engaging gameplay mechanic there, by the way. And then you go into the inner keep and there's like a blacksmith guy, and it's pretty much all the same every single time. There's like 5 or 6 of these forts that are around in the snowy area, and they're pretty much the exact same architecture, and it's just fundamentally boring. And I'd like to see them add a lot more variety and diversity in terms of the different areas in the world in general. Now, this also goes to the towns in the game. What really separates Morningdale from First Light? What really separates First Light from Monarch's Peak or Monarch's Wharf or whatever it was? Well, really nothing. The only thing that separates it is a name. All of the different towns look pretty much the same because they're using all of the same assets. There's not a bunch of unique special assets for each different town, and every town basically feels the same minus a few. And I can contrast this with Warcraft. Stormwind and Ironforge feel very different. You know whenever you're in Stormwind, and you know whenever you're in Ironforge. If you see a screenshot of somebody in one of the towns inside of New World, unless you've played the game for a really long time, you probably can't even tell where the hell they are. That is a huge problem. And it's almost like they only have like 40 different houses that they can use in the entire game. And each different town is just combined with 25 of those different houses of the total 40. So you see a massive, oh, it's the blue building that has the, the stairway on the, yep, it's right on the left, and it works the exact same as the town that I just came from. It's just pretty boring. It's copy paste, and it's just lazy. And so I'd like to see the towns have a little bit more of their own personality and have a little bit more of their own uniqueness. Now, this also translates to the mobs in the game as well. These same alligators and these same undead guys that I was talking about earlier, sorry, again, the ancient guardian guys that I was talking about before, the same ones that you encounter at level 15, you are also encountering at level 50, and they are the exact same mob. We just need, if they doubled the amount of mob types in the game, it probably still wouldn't be enough. Because you'd still have a lot of repeats. I'm okay with some repeats, and I think a certain degree of common themes is good. But whenever common themes is the only theme, that's the problem. And even some of the bosses, the in-game bosses, function the exact same as just the regular NPCs do. They just have a special name. I don't know, man. I think that's boring. And there are a few exceptions with like the Spriggan bosses, which are like the end-game only bosses. But other than that, there aren't really a whole lot of other exciting things in the game in terms of like different special mobs. I kept looking around for something like, oh, am I going to fight like, a kraken or some sort of like gigantic, like massive bear? No, not really. It's pretty much all the same shit. So I think that was kind of disappointment for me personally, and I would have loved to see more different types of mobs. Now, on top of that, let's talk a little bit about the end game for the game and the way that it works. So the max level in New World is 60, and I got to, I think, 58 or 59. Never hit 60 because there was no reason to, which is part of the problem. Most of the gear that you get in the game is all like these massive like kind of steps. So like level 20, all the gear is level 20 requirement. And then at level 35, all the gear is level 35 requirement. But there's not really a lot of 25 or 31 gear. It's pretty much 20, 35, and then 50. So whenever you're 45, you're probably using all your 30 gear. Like, I haven't even seen any gear that isn't requiring one of those two levels. And there isn't really a lot of 60 gear either that I've seen. So the problem with that is that it creates like a massive drought in a player's gear, because most of the time, the way that and I don't know if they're going to change this whenever the game actually comes out, but the factions that you become part of, basically just imagine it like Horde and Alliance. And there's a little bit less restrictions on it versus Horde and Alliance, but you pretty much choose your PvP faction, and the quartermaster for that PvP faction gives you these different items that you're able to buy if you get enough commendations for your faction. Well, here's the problem, is that the commendations are really fucking easy to get if you do these special corrupted zones that are very easy to do, and almost every single player in the alpha, or the preview I mean, was doing them and spamming them over and over and over. So what this ends up being, what this actually looks like for a player, is as soon as you hit max level, within like 2 or 3 levels, you're fully decked out in the entire set of your faction's armor. Now that might sound really cool, except for whenever you realize, okay, great, now what? So the gear progression and gear progression curve in the game is not very good. And I think that's something that you do need to work on. Now, my understanding is that crafting gear is actually going to be like the highest quality possible, because it can get up to, I think, 660, and the legendary gear, which is like the 625 gear, is, it's 625. So crafting gear theoretically has a higher ceiling than the legendary gear does, but because of the preview, we weren't really able to experience that as much. And for a lot of players going into New World, they're just going to get the faction gear and be done with it, and they're not going to really experience the same gear progression that MMOs generally want to provide. And I do think that the way that works is it's not very fun. It sounds fun because you get all the gear, but then what happens after you get all the gear? It's boring. And then you have to spend the next 10 levels grinding until you can get to the next breakpoint where you can get all the gear again. And to put into perspective how efficient and how lucrative I think this is, I believe if they cut it in half, it would still be too good. So that's a huge problem. And also on top of that, the end game bosses. So the way this works is New World is primarily a open world game, but there are these like special bosses that you're able to get keys for called Spriggan bosses, and you can fight these bosses in set groups of 5 people, and they're not really that hard. I didn't get a chance to do the Evergrove one, which is apparently the more challenging one, because we weren't able to get a key. We farmed for it for like 2 days, but we never got one. And anyway, but we did the corrupted one, and it was not really that hard. He had 3 attacks. There's an attack where he did like this. He's got a giant like mallet, and he went like this. And then he has another attack where he goes like this. He does the same thing, but it's faster. And then there's another one where he goes like this. And he jumps and he does it. Watch out. That's hard to deal with. So, yeah. The mechanics are a fucking joke. The bosses are less detailed than BFA trash mobs in a mythic dungeon. They're terrible. And I'd love to see more detailed boss fights. And on top of that, what do you get out of the boss fight? Well, you get a corrupted chest. And you know what's probably in your corrupted chest? A gray. So there's no unique rewards for defeating the endgame bosses, which I do think really kind of sucks. Especially whenever it's an open world game. How do you create challenge in an open world game? I think that's very hard to do. And with New World, what ends up happening, and the meta for the preview became just overwhelming areas that were much higher level and tagging the mobs and getting full experience for them, even though you're level 40 and you're killing level 65 mob. And I do think that fundamentally is a problem as well, but I've seen many things like this happen. So I think the gear progression in the game is completely fucked. I think that the level progression and the way that players go about doing quests is completely fucked. And questing, by the way, is terrible as well. Most quests are, you talk to the guy, and he's like, go do this thing. And you have to go over there, and you kill 15 mobs, and you get 5 items that don't really matter because they're just dropping the mobs that you're killing anyway. And then you also have to loot 5 chests. That right there is like 80% of the quests in the game. It's extremely boring and repetitive. And after you've done 1 or 2 of these, like by the time that you're level 30, it's like, oh my god, I'm only halfway there. And also, they did buff the experience in the preview, so obviously, whenever you're playing it on live, it's going to be even worse. So more quest variety is something that's extremely important, and just in general, more character progression. It needs to feel better. Like, there's not a lot of cosmetic progression either. You don't really feel your character looking that much cooler at level 50 than they did at level 35, or level 60 than they did at level 50. And I think that is a problem. So there's like a lack of in-game rewards that are unique, and I think also just a lack of rewards in general that correlate to any sort of like real skill in the game, which is kind of hard to say with like a PvE game in this way. But I think that, for example, doing a Spriggan boss, for as ever stupid as the one attack thing is, it's still more challenging than going and tagging one NPC once and then getting full loot for it. So later on, right? It's definitely more challenging than that. So I'd like to see more unique rewards for beating the end-game bosses. Now, let's talk a lot about the combat. Now, this is going to be probably the biggest section of the video, because the combat in New World is very hit and miss, literally. So, for example, if you're fighting against an NPC and they shoot a fucking bow at you or they shoot a spell at you, you're added the spell on your screen and you still get fucking hit by it. Why is that? Because it's an online game with latency, and that's just the reality. And this game also, New World, also utilizes a dodge system that's similar to Dark Souls, where you're able to roll and duck and dodge out of things. Well, here's the problem, is that in Dark Souls, the reason why it works is because you play the game locally. And whenever you're playing online, it doesn't. If you've ever played Dark Souls online, it's so bad that people literally have phrases for it, like Phantom Range. And whenever you're watching one of the experienced Dark Souls 3 PvPers, they're going to be making their swing halfway through somebody's roll because they're having to predict their latency. That is the most dog shit mechanic that I can possibly imagine. And I'm not a fan of it at all. I really don't like the way that they have dodges in the game and they expect you to use them, because of the way that the latency in the game works. I'd be completely fine if it was a local game, but having to calculate latency into those types of things does make it very, very annoying. I'm not saying they should get rid of dodges or anything like that, but I also don't think they should design the game around expecting players to dodge because of the fact that you're playing with a bunch of ping depending on where you are in the world. It just seems like it's kind of unfair. And on top of that, there are a number of mobs that whenever you're fighting them, you spend more time being staggered by their attacks. If you're fighting them in melee, obviously, being staggered by their attacks than you do actually fighting them. So you spend more time effectively without control of your character than with control. That, in my opinion, sucks. I don't think that a player, whenever they're fighting an alligator or they're fighting one of these like ogre mobs or one of the giant demon monsters, every single melee attack should turn your character. He falls down, and he flops on the ground, and then he was laying on the ground, and then he finally gets up, and he gets knocked down again. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me, man? Is this serious? Like, what the fuck is going on? And it's just very boring. And I don't think that this is not an argument to make the game easier. I don't think the game should be easier. I think the game's already very easy. I just think that the difficulty is displaced in a frustrating and unfun and often unfair way. Now, why do I say unfair? Because there's some bosses that they will have AoEs on the ground that clearly telegraph circles on the ground, and you are out of the circle, but you still get hit by the AoE. I think that's bullshit. I think that if you're going to make the AoE bigger, make it bigger. But if you're going to have the circle on the ground, have that be where the AoE is going to do damage. And that is, in my opinion, just a very unfair and unfun mechanic. And there's a certain amount of knowledge that you can have, like, oh, well, you have to learn that some of these things aren't exactly what they say they are. Give me a fucking break. It's just dog shit game design, and there's no reason that it should ever exist. It's the same thing also, like hitbox problems are an issue in this game in many ways. I think alligators are like this, and I went and I was showing the alligator next to my character. I was running away from it, and the alligator can bite you, And you can look at the frame, the individual pixel, and the alligator's like this far away, but somehow he's still biting you. How the fuck does that work? It's just bullshit. So cutting down and doing a better job with these hitbox problems, I think is going to be a very big challenge for New World, and making these abilities seem fair is going to be a very big challenge as well. Like there's another example where I was fighting against another monster. I think it's actually the same one with the AoEs, and he does a combo. Like he'll hit you once, and then of course the damage occurs at the beginning of the animation and not the end of it, or it might be at the beginning, but the problem is with your latency, it happens at the beginning because in the game it's actually at the end. So you get knocked down by the first attack, and then he hits you with 4 more attacks that also subsequently knock you down, and by the end of it you're at 10% health or you're dead. I don't know, I think that sucks. Like that sucks, because like if you're gonna punish a player for making a mistake at the beginning by getting hit the first time, I think you should just punish them once rather than punish them over and over and over and over again. So what I mean to say is that if you're gonna have an ability like that, just have it do the full fucking damage in one attack. Don't just keep the player stun locked while the guy just beats the shit out of you and you can't even control your character. It's just not very fun to play. Maybe I'm in the minority about this, but I genuinely had less fun playing the game because of that, and it actively made my experience worse, and it made me resent the game because of how unfair I felt like some of those mechanics were. And ultimately, we were able to beat every boss in the game pretty much that we went up against. There was not really any challenge a lot in the game. I just think that they should make the challenge more fair and more fun and less frustrating. So that's one of the big things with combat. And I think generally combat that revolves around preventing the other player from, or the player from being able to control their character is not fun to me. It's just not fun. I want to be able to control my character and know what I'm doing. And I think PvP also has this issue, but PvP isn't even nearly as bad as PvE. New World was originally supposed to be a PvP game, so I think that many of the things in New World with PvP are not really that bad. But I also want to talk a little bit about crafting and what I think about that. So crafting, I think they did a great job with it in general. I think the progression from crafting is incredible. A lot of the ways that you're able to progress and move forward with crafting is enjoyable to do. And as far as I know, the highest end gear is from crafting. And I think that's a really interesting, cool thing. So the problem that I have with crafting, and this is like a very, very small issue, is with gathering, is that I don't like how much of a gap there is between like getting one thing to getting the next thing. So I think with logging, I'll give you an example. I need to take a drink because I've been talking a lot. One take videos. Sometimes you gotta take a second. Oh, anyway, crafting, gathering. Gathering is very fun in the game. So like going out, cutting down trees, seeing the trees fall down, getting the lumber, taking the lumber back to your storage, and then cutting the lumber up and refining it. This is awesome. I love this. And there was one time we were going up to fight this grizzly bear, and I saw there's this little small grove of blue trees. And so I'm like, hey boys, the blue trees are mine. And so I go up and I go to cut down the blue tree, and it says logging required 200. And at this point, my logging is like 30. And I think to myself, I'm like, well, there's nobody else that's going to be stupid enough to level up logging 200 points on a beta that's going to be deleted in 10 days. Might as well be me. And so I started getting to it. And I cut down 1,000,000 fucking trees. And I finally got up to the point to where I had 200 logging. And I went in there, and it was fucking glorious cutting down that blue tree. Oh, it felt so good. I loved it. So I think that was really, really cool. But here's the problem, is that whenever you go to refine these resources and you get the resource itself, you see that oftentimes other people get the same resources from salvaging gear that's around that same higher level, or also just getting it out of chests as well. Like from the weird wood is like the specific thing that I'm talking about. And I think that being able to get these high level, very exclusive gathering resources from ways that are not gathering does actually devalue the leveling of the professions. And I think that also the leveling of the professions is very it's not very tiered in a fair way, or not fair, not in a fun way. So like for example, herbalism, or what they call in this game crafting, the way not crafting, harvesting. They call it harvesting. From level 30 all the way up to 180, you don't get anything. So you get your first thing at level 30, and then the next thing after 30 is at 180. Now you're able to harvest more out of the plants that you start with at level 30, but other than that, you don't really get a whole lot else. And I feel like in terms of the progression of gathering, it's not really as fun. Now, mining does a great job with this. I love the way mining works, because you start off doing stone, then you do iron, then you do silver, then you do gold, then you do, I think it's like lodestones or elemental stones, and then it's star metal, and then there's like the red ore at the top, and it's awesome. And each one is like maybe 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 levels from each other, not at 150 like in harvesting. And I like to see some of that kind of narrowed down, and giving players a little bit more things that they can look forward to, rather than just that massive gap of time where they're just doing the exact same thing. But overall, I would say crafting is probably one of the more positive things about New World, and it's one of the things that a lot of the people that I've talked to about the game have enjoyed. It seems like the progression of it is fun, crafting the items is enjoyable, and in general, it's just a good experience. So, I think to me, to wrap up, I'll talk about some of the smaller things. Fast travel around the world. You need Azoth, which is basically some sort of like resource, a little bit too close to Azurite, but it's okay. And basically, you use this in order to travel around in the world, but you can only hold 1,000 of it at a time. I don't really like that. I think it should be more. You should be able to hold more of it, not necessarily have things cost less. Owning a house in the game is kind of cool. It's fun. There's no fishing in the game. I think that needs to change. Fishing in a game like New World, I think, should just be obvious. You should definitely have fishing. And just giving more things that people can craft and look forward to and do is, of course, something that's really cool. And I also do think the game probably could use a little bit more instance content, especially if you want to have some degree of challenge for PvE players. For me right now, it feels like a lot of the game is pretty easy to do, because you just get the gear that you get from your faction quartermasters, and you go in there and you pretty much just overrun any sort of mob or anything like that in the open world. Because if you're having trouble with it, you just bring more people. That's just really all there is to it. And I think that's kind of boring, honestly, as like a solution to the game, because usually people do that to remove all the challenge out of the game. And I think that's what was happening a lot in the preview, and I think that's what's going to happen even more whenever the game actually comes out, because people will have known, okay, well, I should go here and do this, or to go here and do that. So I do think that needs to change, but overall, I think the PvP in the game is generally pretty interesting. There are some things that I'm not really a big fan of. So there's like one ability, you don't have classes in New World, you have kind of weapons, and the different weapon that you have, you can level up in different ways. So there's one weapon called the Life Staff, and Life Staff has an ability that allows you to teleport 40 yards in front of you. So guess what everybody's using whenever they're running around? Everybody's using a Life Staff. In my opinion, I think this ability should just be taken out of the game. Like, it's way too powerful, and it makes it to where, because it moves your character so much, it's at the point now where every single person has it. So the weapon choice is no longer a choice whenever every single person uses the Life Staff for this one niche reason. And I don't really think that's very good gameplay at all. And I think it actually kind of makes the game more boring if you know that every single person has this teleport ability that's able to just completely remove them from a combat situation. So I do think the weapons in general do need tuning. Like the Warhammer, I think, is just way worse than the hatchet in like 95% of scenarios. Other things I think are a little bit more balanced than people give them credit for. But for the most part, I think the game could use a lot of little quality of life changes like that and balancing changes to where players don't feel like they have to use a certain item or use a certain meta in order to stay competitive in the game. And I think that's absolutely what happened at the end of New World with all of the life staff spam. If you saw anybody at level 40 or 50, you can almost guarantee yourself that you're spamming the life staff to go around. But I do want to talk about just general my thoughts about the game as a whole. I had a lot of fun. I really did. I had a lot of fun playing the game. I really enjoyed it. I I made friends, people that I had never really met before, and we played the game all the time together. It was really enjoyable, and I had fun. I think that the company sizes, the guild sizes are too small, but with the people that I did play with, I really enjoyed what I did. And the funny thing about it is that this video is going on for 30 minutes now, and I feel like there's like so many other things that I could talk about, but these are some of the main big picture things about the game that I do really think are important that need to be covered. So overall, I think the game has a great foundation. It's got a potentially good future, but they need to add some quality of life features that just make playing the game more enjoyable. I think that's really what it comes down to, and less frustrating. Another minor thing is body blocking. You like trying to kill a mob, and then there's a bunch of other people that are in front of it attacking it. Well, obviously, like maybe you should go somewhere else, but you can't really control the amount of people that are in the area. So sometimes you just have people that are adding artificial difficulty to what you're doing because there's so many of them there. And I think that is kind of boring. It's not really as fun. So overall, I'd say New World is a good game. I've enjoyed it. Would I recommend buying it? I would recommend waiting until the game's about to come out and then check back with me and we'll see what happens. But overall, I enjoyed my time playing it. It was very fun. And I look forward to seeing what they do next. And we had an interview with one of the developers, and they seem really open and receptive to feedback. And I just certainly hope that's the case, and they can take what people have said and the players have wanted, take that to heart, and be able to make the best game possible. I think a lot of us really want to see a new good MMO, and that's why I've been so positive, and I've tried to promote it as much as I can, because I really just want to have a new game like that I can play and really, really just enjoy. So thank you guys very much for watching. If you played in a preview or you had experience with the game, I'd be curious to hear your feedback and your thoughts. But you know, this is my review, my short review of the game, and kind of what I thought of it. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I've got. So thanks a lot for watching, and until next time, peace.